All right, picture this. You're trapped, deep underground. It's been a month. Food? That ran out weeks ago. To have any chance of living, one of you has to die. So you make this absolutely impossible choice, and you survive. But here's the kicker. When you finally get rescued, they don't call you a survivor. Nope, they call you a murderer. This is the incredible and incredibly famous thought experiment known as the case of the Speluncean Explorers.
So let's set the scene. We've got 5 guys, amateur cave explorers, part of something called the Speluncean Society. They head deep into this limestone cave and then disaster strikes. A huge landslide completely seals up the only way in or out. Just like that, they're trapped, buried alive in what's essentially a prison of solid rock.
Okay, so for weeks, there's this huge, really dangerous rescue mission happening up on the surface. But down below, well, this timeline tells you everything you need to know about how desperate things got. So, day 1, they're trapped. Fast forward to day 20, they finally make radio contact, but the news is just devastating. They're told a rescue is at least another 10 days away, and doctors on the surface confirm there's no way they can survive that long without food. So, after what I can only imagine was a gut-wrenching conversation, on day 23, they go through with a plan. A plan, by the way, that was first suggested by one of their own, Roger Wetmore. They roll dice. He loses, and his companions kill and eat him. It's grim. 9 days later, the 4 survivors are rescued. But there's another tragedy here. That rescue effort cost the lives of 10 workers. Just an unbelievably high cost all around.
So, they've survived the cave, right? But their ordeal is far from over. Now they're facing a courtroom. The 4 of them are charged with the murder of Roger Whitmore. In this case, it's not just about them. It basically puts the whole legal system on trial. It forces everyone to answer this one huge, impossible question. Was what they did a necessary act of survival, or was it just plain murder?
And this is where things get really interesting, turning into a total legal firestorm. This case ends up going all the way to the Supreme Court. And what you have is this epic collision, the cold, hard letter of the law smashing right into the unimaginable reality these guys just lived through.
So, at the very heart of this whole thing is one single sentence from the law. It's brutally clear. Whoever shall willfully take the life of another shall be punished by death. That's it. There are no asterisks, no exceptions listed for, being trapped in a cave and starving to death. Nothing. Just a simple, absolute command. On the face of it, there's really no room for debate, is there? So here's the core dilemma, the real problem for the court. On one hand, you look at what they did. The act itself, it seems to fit the law perfectly. It was willful, it was intentional, they absolutely took a life. But then you look at the context, and that's something the people who wrote this law probably never, ever imagined. These guys were totally cut off from society, in a situation where you could argue the normal rules just didn't apply anymore.
Okay, so this brings us to the first major legal argument we see in the court. This is the one championed by a judge named Justice Keene. And his position is, honestly, pretty simple. The law is a rule book. That's it. A judge's job is to enforce the rules in that book, exactly as they're written. You don't get to rewrite them just because you have certain feelings about a case.
And Justice Keene's own words really nail this philosophy. He says, "I respect the obligations of an office that requires me to put my personal predilections out of my mind." Basically, he's saying, look, I might feel bad for these guys, I might have sympathy for them as a person, but I'm not here as a person. I'm here as a judge. And as a judge, his feelings are totally irrelevant. His only job is to apply the law that's on the books.
So this whole rule book way of thinking, which, by the way, has a fancy name, legal positivism, it all boils down to a few key points. First, the words in the law are crystal clear. Second, the court's job isn't to ask if the law is moral or right, it's just to apply it. Your personal feelings? Irrelevant. And if you think an exception should be made, well, that's a job for the politicians, the legislature, not for judges. So if you follow this logic, there's only one conclusion you can come to. They're guilty. Period.
But, of course, there's another side to this, a really powerful counter-argument that basically says, hey, a law without common sense is just tyranny. And the big champion for this point of view is Justice Foster.
Now, Justice Foster, he comes at this from a totally different angle. He argues that you can't just stare at the literal words on the page. You have to ask why the law exists in the first place. What's its purpose, right? I mean, a law against murder is there to stop people from killing each other in our normal functioning society. But what on earth does that law mean when you're talking about men trapped in a cave who are literally going to die anyway?
So Foster's argument is really twofold. First, he says, look, these guys weren't even in our society anymore. They were in what philosophers call a state of nature. The laws of our land simply didn't apply down there.
They basically made a new social contract with that dice roll. But then he says, okay, even if you think our laws did apply, the whole point of the murder law is deterrence, and that's totally useless here. You can't deter a starving man from doing what he has to do to survive. He says it's kind of like self-defense. That's an exception we all accept, even though it's not written into the murder statute, because common sense just demands it. He thinks convicting these men would be, in a word, absurd. So what you have are two incredibly powerful, logical, and completely opposite arguments. In the Supreme Court, they are totally paralyzed. They just cannot agree on what justice even means in this case. And this whole struggle is perfectly personified by another judge, Justice Tatting. This guy is just torn apart by this. Intellectually, emotionally, he's trapped. He looks at Foster's state of nature argument and sees a bunch of holes in it. But at the same time, the idea of sentencing these men to death just disgusts him. He calls it an absurdity. He can't find a single rational principle to hang his hat on, so he does something you almost never see. He just withdraws from the case entirely. And Justice Tatting's decision to back out, it has a catastrophic consequence. Here's how the vote breaks down. You've got Justice Truepenny and Justice Keene, the rulebook guys, voting to convict. Then you have Justice Foster and another judge, Justice Handy, voting to acquit, arguing for common sense.
So what does that leave us with? A court that is split right down the middle. 2 votes for guilty, 2 votes for innocent. It's a perfect 2-2 tie.
And this is where a brutal little twist of legal procedure comes in. See, when a high court like this is tied, the decision from the lower court is the one that stands. And guess what the lower court decided? They found the explorers guilty. So, in a strange and tragic way, by failing to make a decision, the Supreme Court actually made one.
So the 4 men who somehow survived 32 days trapped in that cave, the men who made an absolutely unthinkable choice to live, are now sentenced to be hanged, condemned to die by the very system of laws that was supposed to protect them.
The verdict might be in, but the real question is still hanging in the air. And that's exactly why this case is still argued about in law schools all over the world. It makes us face one of the most fundamental questions there is about law itself.
So where do you land on all this? What's the right answer here? Is justice really about applying the rules consistently, no matter what, even if the outcome feels deeply wrong? Or should the law be flexible? Should it be able to bend to fit these insane, extreme circumstances to get to what feels like a more just result? You know, this isn't just some dusty old thought experiment. It's a real conflict that judges and lawyers grapple with every single day. And it's one of those permanent and frankly fascinating problems that we have to deal with.